Welcome to the New Discovery Christian Podcast, where you'll find Bible messaging and sermons that will encourage, uplift, and challenge you to a godlier life. Join our community and become inspired to continue living a God-directed life.
Welcome again to the New Discovery Podcast. I'm here, Kyle, as your host, and I've got Javan and I've got Zach today as my co-hosts. And here we are. We're gonna be jumping into Scripture again with Bible with the Bros, and we're still in Genesis. So if you want to follow along with us, yeah, a little. I don't know what was in my throat. Golly,
Got a little acorn in that throat.
a little chicken wing.
Oh,
Throwback.
Yeah, we're going to be going through chapter 5. So if you want to follow along with us, we're going to be jumping in there. Zach's going to take it first, and then me, and then Javan. And then we'll, as we usually do, jump on in. Also, if you can do us a good, throw us a like, and throw us a subscribe if you want to. If you're enjoying this content, just a little reminder. So, Zach, take it off for me.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we got chapter 5, Genesis, verse 1. This is the written account of Adam's line. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them. And when they were created, he called them man. When Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Adam lived 930 years, and then he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he became a father. Man, getting old when he was a dad.
Yes, sir.
He was the father of Enoch. And after he became the father of Enoch, Seth lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Seth lived 912 years, and then he died.
Okay, so in verse 9, when Enoch had lived 90 years, he became the father of Canaan. After he had become the father of Canaan, Enoch lived 815 years and had other sons and daughters altogether. And after 905 years, then he died. Canaan lived 7 years and became the father of Mahalalel. And after he had a father of Mahalalel, Canaan lived 804 years and had sons and daughters. And he lived 910 years, then he died. When Mahalalel lived 65 years, he became the father of Jared, and became the father of Mahalalel, lived 830 years and had sons and daughters. Altogether, he lived 895. Then he died. Then Jared had lived 162 years, and he became the father of Enoch. He became the father of Enoch, and Jared lived 800 years. And altogether, Jared lived 962. Then he died. When Enoch had lived 65, he became the father of Methuselah. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God for 300 years, and he had sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived 365. Enoch walked faithfully with God, and then he was no more, because God took him away.
When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. After he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Methuselah lived a total of 969 years, and then he died. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he had a son. He named him Noah and said, "He will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands, caused by the ground the Lord has cursed." After Noah was born, Lamech lived 595 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Lamech lived a total of 777 years, and then he died.
I like it.
After Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Okay.
Imagine being named
777,
Ham.
dude. If I could live, that's a blessed age.
That's
right
actually,
there, man.
yeah, that's a cool number.
777 years old, man.
That's, I guess we'll start with that, because some people are going to wonder right now why we read through this, and that's a really good question. So, first of all, when you read through a family genealogy, you have to know what's going through someone's mind in the ancient times. They're thinking, okay, so they're being fruitful and multiplying like God created in the beginning in Genesis. They're still under the blessing. And what should come to our mind in that is not like whose name is what and like whose family, and how many years and things like that. The years can be just thought of, whether they're literal or
just
symbolic.
Interesting, you know.
Well, whether they're literal or symbolic, God is still blessing these people, and we'll get to the whole thing with Enoch being faithful, but God is blessing all of these people, even though they're not faithful. There's something about God's love still being there, and they're fruitful and multiplying. God hasn't restricted that blessing from people. He's still loving. There's a love that's being shown here, because you don't read only about Enoch and it's like, okay, God blessed him. He let him live long. He gave him multiple kids, but these other ones who weren't faithful, yeah, he didn't give that to them. He just restricted it from. There's still a love that's being given, and that's what should be more on our mind in that, is that God's love even goes out to those who are not faithful when it comes to that blessing in Genesis. God is faithful to his word. So we need to remember that. That's just on the surface, but there's details also in here.
Can I say something right quick?
Absolutely.
And then with what you were saying, how he blesses everyone, and there's even a passage, I think it's in Matthew, where it says, he brings rain on every, the
wicked and the righteous.
Yeah. So that goes to that. And then you see where Enoch, or Enosh, however you wanted to pronounce it, it says, he lived 365 years, where everyone else is living, 969 Methuselah, 830 Jared, all these higher ages. It looks like he was taken away real early, like in the prime of his life, in comparison.
Yeah.
And then, I think we're going to dive into, why it didn't say he died. It said the Lord took him up. But I just want to say that, it rains on the wicked and the righteous.
And the righteous,
And it seems like everyone was blessed with long years here, but the person who was actually walking with God was taken before. So it kind of just makes me think, I've had people come to me like, oh, so-and-so was such a godly man. Why did God let him die when he was 32 years old?
Yeah.
People will say that, just the problem, with death. And
right.
I think it shows here that, you could be walking with the Lord, and it might be his plan, your time to go.
Yeah.
Time to go home.
I'm going to hash up what you just said, because that's a good point you just brought up. There's another king who actually, King Josiah, this is way later in like 2 Kings, this is before Babylon comes in. And Josiah was actually going to attack the Egyptians because he was allied with the Babylonians. So they were two rivals with each other. The Babylonians were going to get attacked, but they were on the side of the Babylonians. So he's like, you're not coming through Israel, Egypt. Like, I'm going to stop you. And what it says essentially is they fought a battle, and Josiah is like, he's ranked almost above David, like in faithfulness, like, and David's kind of like the epitome. Jesus is even linked with David and his righteousness. But it says that God allowed him to die in that battle so that he didn't have to endure seeing Israel, his kingdom, being destroyed. So it was actually, God allowed him to pass away as a type of relief from being able to have all of that distress and, why did you let Babylon come in and destroy us? You're the king. And God actually removed him from all of that in his prime. So he went out in his prime. Kind of like what you're saying. Like Enoch went out in his prime and took him out. And that was like a blessing, going out in your prime versus like going out in just a very bad, sucky kind of way. It was more honorable kind of way to go out,
My dad always says, he wishes God would take him now, like, because he's, all these aches and pains and, stress increases. And, as you get older, those complications happen. So I could definitely see that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of linked with that, I believe. And it has to do with him walking. And then I guess we can jump into the whole part here about, it mentions twice about him walking faithfully. And so in all of this, when it talks about whole genealogy, why we went through this is when specific things are mentioned.
Who's mentioned walking faithfully, so the listeners know?
Enoch.
Okay.
Yeah. So if they want to know, it's in verse 21. It starts to eat into that with Enoch. It repeats twice. Walked faithfully with God 300 years. Jump down a little bit. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more because God took him away. And then it mentions it twice, a specific detail. Bible doesn't give a lot of details, and when it does, it's like, red alert, listen. If it repeats it twice, it's more so. It's like, dang, 2 red alerts, listen. And now, just only a couple pages back, the first time we heard about walking faithfully, or walking, is God walking in the garden with Adam and Eve. So somehow Enosh is walking with God and having that type of relationship with God. And that's what's supposed to be coming back in our mind is Enosh is doing the garden thing, being with God and having a relationship with him. And he's seeking, and there's a little bit of subtlety that he's seeking that wisdom from God, like we were talking about before. And he's not seeking it like from the fruit, if that makes sense. So he's kind of like the guy getting things back on track here. And they're supposed to be like, okay, because all these people, they get a little bit of talk and they all died. Okay, he died. He died.
It's like a poem, like, and then he died, and then he died. And
right.
Then he died.
It's like, and again, it's repeating. Then he died. Then he died. Then he died. Then he died. Wait, Enosh lived though. Wait a minute. The tree of life, isn't that in the garden? He's walking faithfully. So he's walking like the garden faithfully with God. And he lived like the tree of life, and then there's a connection with the tree of wisdom and what he's doing. There's a book called First Enoch. It's not in the Bible. It's in the.
Does the CH make a sh sound or a ch sound? Or
Enoch.
Is it Enosh or Enoch or?
It would be Enosh if it was an SH.
Right.
Like I think there's another Enoch. There is an Enosh in the Bible.
Okay.
But this is Enoch. Though.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. But yeah, there's another Bible, not another Bible. There's another
book.
written, scriptures. They're called the Apocrypha, and in there, there's a book called First Enoch, and some traditions link it back to Enoch, but like the Catholics include it in the Bible, but we don't with our tradition. But in there, it talks about how he was. It talks about first of how he was taken away, like in a whirlwind, kind of like Eli, the prophet Eli was.
Is this another book of the Catholic Bible?
The Catholic
have their own Bible?
So there's other written sources, you could say, that it's kind of complicated. I'll explain the best I can just for everyone else. So there's other things that were written down, and at one point within the church history, in a few different councils they were called, about like after the Roman Empire time, the churches got together and they had all these writings. And they're like, which ones are canon? Like which one is inspired by God and which ones are helpful, but they're not inspired by God. And
How could they tell that?
So like going back in the Bible, is there references within the Old Testament, New Testament? If it's not referenced in there, typically it starts to get on the side of it's a wise reading, but it's not scripture. That would be just like a very simple way to explain it. But there's other ways too, because it gets complicated when in Jude, one of the last, it's like right before Revelation.
Yeah.
He quotes First Enoch. That gets a little like, oh, okay.
Jude does?
Yeah, Jude quotes it, and he talks about where Moses' body was hidden and where it is. It's kind of like, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
It's from First Enoch. But our tradition doesn't believe it's like canon scripture. So, but I'm actually reading. It's actually in my book, in my bag over there. I'm reading through First Enoch, actually. And there's certain things that are very interesting that I like reading. Do I think it's canon? No, but I think there was someone wise that was reading it, and I learned a little bit about the Jewish culture, which helps me translate scripture when I'm reading through it. But one thing that they mention is he's taken up in a whirlwind, and one thing that's interesting is he's described as someone who's like a sage / like really good scholar. So like he's someone who's trying to get in tune with God in this time. Now, whether or not like that's true or not, but that's how he was viewed, you could say, within that time period. But those are a few of the references that are really important, is that faithfulness. Because even here, God is faithful to allow these people to prosper with many children and many years attached to their life. And that's God wasn't like, oh, you made me angry. Well, I'm going to go back on my word. No, God's like, I'm faithful to my word. And even if you don't go along with what I say, or maybe you get me upset, I'm not going to take that back. There's something going on with that Enoch, he's living, he's doing the image. He's doing the image of God there. And I think that's something for us I think we're supposed to look at that. If someone makes us upset or makes us angry, do we go back on our word? Do we go back on our faithfulness to that person? Are we like, he made me angry. I have nothing to do with you anymore.
You offer somebody a job or something, and you say, "Hey, you can work here," and then they make you mad one day, and then you fire them. That'd be like going against your word.
Right.
Like no, y'all talk about it, or you figure it out,
Right.
or you give them another chance.
Yeah, and it never says in here that God is friends with any of these people. It doesn't say that. Again, it's still realistic. It's not like it's all like hippie and peace and love or anything like that. It's not like, yeah, God just loves anyone, man. Yeah, peace and love. Let live and let live. It's not like that here, because God doesn't say that he's his friend, doesn't say that he's walking with them. There is a restriction of relationship. It's still being real here. It's being truthful. But God said, I'm going to bless you and multiply you. And he's like, I'm not going to restrict that because I said I was going to do that. Now, if you want to have a relationship with me, man, that's your choice. There's conditions there. And Enoch he's following those conditions. He's like, I want to follow you. I want to walk with you. I want to become more like you. So there's something cooking there for us to remember. Is Enoch? Is that one part? Are we like Enoch? Do we walk faithfully with God, walk faithfully with other people, or do we go back on our word? I mean, I don't know. Javen, what about you? Is there anything about Enoch or anything else that you mentioned in there? He was like the main thing I wanted to bring up.
I guess you could say that through your parents' faith, you could be in their little blessing umbrella. I guess that's what I got from it. Like, sometimes I feel like I don't deserve some of the blessings I get in my life, but it was through my parents that I was able to get them through their faith and righteousness. Sometimes I feel like that.
There's a truth in that, because in all honesty, with parents, yes, because it says train a child in their ways and they won't turn from it. Now, of course, they can not be a believer, but there's certain things you impressed upon them. They're like, that's a part of them then. Yeah. But to be fair, are we not sitting on the blessings right now in this building? This building is from a different church that planted this, that we don't even know them. And we're sitting on that blessing. We didn't build this church. They did. We don't even know them. And there's another building over here where people built this building or started this church when they started this church, I was probably like 6. You were probably like, what, 3 or 4?
This building was a church?
This building was a church.
Yeah. It was like one of those old-timey churches with wooden pews and a baptism right over there. I don't know. How did they get rid of that baptism?
Knocked the wall out.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've done some major renovations.
Oh, there's a lot of renovations in here.
This place looked different.
Yeah.
And I remember it. It was like that classic wooden church look.
I know what you're talking about.
I mean, it was around since the 70s.
Yeah.
So, like, we don't know anyone from there, and we don't even know who founded it, because more than likely, even the people who were still here when we got to the building, like, they were probably a generation after that. But we're still sitting in a building that someone else has blessed us with, and we don't know them, if that makes sense. There's something about that in here and what Javan is saying. Like, we're being handed over blessings and things from other people being handed down. And then soon we're gonna jump into Noah after that, because it doesn't mention Noah here at the end for no reason. It's like, hey, little footnote. We're gonna start getting to Noah. Yeah, and he comes right after about walking with faithfulness, and then what does the title say for your guys for 6?
Wickedness in the world.
Yeah. So so we went from there's some faithfulness in there, and it's like a little treat as we go into this wickedness. So it's kind of like there is hope still in here as you jump into that, because next time we jump in, it's going to be kind of like very hopeless.
So how about this? Like, everyone else was having kids like 182, 187. Enoch was 65. There were 162 for Jared when he became a dad. Noah, 500 years old, became the father. Like, I feel like that he must have been an older man in comparison to everyone else, like a lot older, more than double the age, almost triple the age when he first became a dad.
Yeah, just like with the age thing, whether it's literal, symbolic, it's just kind of questionable. It's not very clear.
Did they even know what a year was back then? Like, could they really have a good calendar on 365 days?
I bet they had a calendar.
They had a calendar, but it's more like solar with the stars. It's definitely not our Gregorian calendar from Roman times,
Gregorian.
slash medieval times. So it was more like that. It starts to just get kind of down in the beating around in the bush trying to figure that stuff out.
Pretty exact, though. I mean, I would say they give you exact numbers like 969, 777, 365 years. These are all kind of like
Weird.
Yeah, they're like
365.
symbolic numbers. They're like kind of special numbers. It's almost like
They're for sure symbolic.
sacred.
Yeah.
Because seven's a cool number. Like 7 in a casino. Like if you
Right.
get sevens, like you're winning some money. And then 969 is like
Yeah, you are.
is like 9, and then upside down 9, and then turn it around, it's another 9. So it's
And
kind of like
they're-
a cool visual number.
And they're 10 generations, and there's 10 commandments.
Yep.
So they even use the number of generations to be symbolic. They even do that with Jesus. How Matthew and Luke both have a genealogy. I believe Luke does as well. I'm trying to remember. It may be Mark. Someone can correct me in the comments maybe if I made a mistake there. But one of them edits out a couple of people in the genealogy, but they do it on purpose because they want a certain number. And that's just the way they do it. They don't see it as wrong. They're just like, we want to be symbolic. So they're like, if you want to find out the real number, I mean, you can. But that's not what they're trying to do, though. So sometimes there's nothing wrong with editing it in their mindset because in the end, they want a message to give across. They're not being false or deceitful or anything like that. It's just they're trying to get across a message, an impression on you as you're looking through it.
You think there's missing chapters to like the early texts of Genesis? Not missing as in like missing because they weren't really part of the objective.
I see what you're saying.
They were kind of like, what's it called in a book when it's like not needed?
Filler.
Yeah, like there's
even like in a movie. There's deleted
like,
scenes.
Yeah, like
movie.
a delete. Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of saying it. Like
I'm glad you brought that up.
an extended cut.
Because we're about to go to the end. We're almost done with like the Genesis part where it's like going from highly symbolic to we're about to get to Abraham and it slows way down to one person. So I'm glad you brought that up because I do think that because it depends on, I think the question is, what is Scripture trying to do? I think it's trying to get across a certain message. It's not trying to be like, hey, here's a snap photo of what happened, and that's what we're giving you. And that's why they can edit out certain numbers and things like that, because they're not trying to be a history book. Now, some people are going to disagree with me on that this is a history book and a science book, and I would disagree with both of those statements, that it's a history book and a science book, because there's a lot of things that are purposely taken out. If someone has a problem with the history part, go to 2 Kings and read about how it says, oh, this happened in this king. Then it says everything else that happened to this king is written in the annals of the kings. They put that in
They
there.
say that all the time.
Constantly.
over and over.
And it's like, why? It's because they're like, we're not so hyper-focused on what exactly happened with him because they just got done saying this was a wicked king. That's all we need to know.
Yeah.
He was a wicked king.
And then
everything
if you wanna
else is
read
just
more, go to the annals.
Go to the annals. Yeah, go there. So the impression that we're supposed to get with that is this isn't a history book, and if you want history, go to the history book and go read it. And I would say, and in certain ways in here, how the Bible even talks about, even for the sky in Genesis, the literal word for that is, now some people put firmament and dome, words we don't use on purpose, because the literal word is a hammered sheet of metal. Okay, so what's going on with that? If that's literal, there's a literal sheet of metal that's been pounded out in the sky. People back then literally thought that's what it was. It was a dome. It looked like something like a shield, how it's put down and was bashed inward and it's hanging in the sky. Now, some people would say, oh, that means Scripture's incorrect. I disagree with you. And then some people would say, oh, well, it literally is kind of like a dome and stuff. And like way back when there was like they would say like sediment was solidified and just like trying to make it work.
It's
And I disagree with both of
It's
those
what
people.
it's meant to the people who were reading it back then, man.
Yeah, even Jesus says, go to the ends of the earth. Okay, let's take that literal. Where's the ends of the earth? Does it just fall off? No, Jesus was talking to people who believed that there was literal ends of the earth, and that was believed all the way through up to, I mean, even like in the Pirates of the Caribbean, it's true when they talk about the end of the world. There's one of them that's the end of the world. They believe, a lot of people believe that all the way up to that point.
Yeah.
Like that's a long time afterwards.
Like the waterfall or whatever?
Yeah, like the waterfall
At
going
the end
off
of
the
the-
earth.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So they believed that in Jesus's, even before Jesus' time, all the way up till then. And again, you could take the spot, is scripture incorrect, or are we going to try to make that work somehow? There's some kind of ends of the earth and just finagle that. I disagree with both those people, respectfully. And it's just God is speaking to people in their culture and what they believe. And one of those things is how in the Old Testament it talks about love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and it doesn't say mind. Is another word for it, all your heart and all your mind, or with all your heart, soul, and strength. That's the Old Testament. Jesus says with all your heart, soul, and mind. Mind wasn't an idea in the Old Testament. Mind was an idea after people like Plato and Aristotle. So what's Jesus doing there? Is he incorrect? Was there a lie in the Old Testament? No, there wasn't any lying or anything like that. It's just there was the new idea of someone having a mind later, where that was not an idea in the Old Testament. And he's speaking to people within that time, and that what he's saying is about to go out to the Greeks, which are people who have interacted with people like Plato and Aristotle, who've talked about the mind.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh yeah, like the mind. Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense to me. That doesn't make Old Testament incorrect. God is speaking to us where we are. God is not trying to impress history or science upon us. Like, give us new, and some people are going to disagree with me on that, but I would say if you read scripture in total, you'll see that there's a message about Jesus starting in the Old Testament. There's a message with Jesus in the beginning, and that's the message that's trying to get across to us, is God hasn't given up on us. God is working through soon Abraham and this family. He's going to come in through Jesus, and he's restoring what's happening. He's been faithful to us. He's been loyal to us. And the whole message revolves around that. Anything else that doesn't revolve around that is edited out, and it's in the annals of the kings. That's just the main thing. And some of these books in the Apocrypha, I think, fall in the line of like the annals of the kings type of reading. Tradition, or some of them, like First Maccabees, is literal history about what happened when there was a Greek kingdom called the Seleucids, when one of the generals of Alexander the Great came in and took over Israel. First and Second Maccabees are essentially about all that history, but that's not in scripture though. It's history.
Yeah.
But it's like, go ahead and read it, and you can find out what happened between the Old Testament and when Jesus came on the scene, because that's when that happened. But it's not in scripture. People decided that way back before us, and I think people wiser than us as well, were like, that's history, and it's cool to read it. And sometimes they include it in the back of the Bible. Some people include it in the Bible, like the Catholics do. I would respectfully say it's something wise to read alongside the Bible, but it's not inspired scripture. It's not a part of the Jesus message. That's what separates it. It's not a part of the Jesus message.
I think the Bible is not either one of those either, but I think it does contain some information relevant to science and relevant to
I think it
history.
inspires us to also love God with our heart, our soul, and guess what? Our mind. And I think it inspires us to be thoughtful, inspires us to be creative. We're supposed to rule the world and be like God? Well, God is a creator. So creation goes with science, and I think we're inspired to do that. And I think there's a lot of things within the scriptures that inspires us to think that way. Some people would even go so far as to say that science came about from Christianity, because it makes you think in a more creative type of mindset about the world, and thinking about it more as in like mechanics with the creator. And some of that came about from people talking about Christianity and standing up for it with apologetics, because the world looks like a creator put it together. So they started talking about it as in like a creator
Different
and
parts,
like a watchmaker, and there's things in tune. So when you start thinking like that, then the scientific method starts to think in your mind about how things work together. And that's just a theory. I'm not
It makes
going to
sense
get
to
into
me.
that. But that was I think that's I think that would be good to stop right there,
Yeah.
and I think it's a good jump as we go forward into the rest of the Bible with the bros.
Big Noah's coming next time.
Yes, he is, and the big flood too.
big flood.
Coming. So thank you for jumping in with us, and if you guys have any comments of what's going on in here, because we don't have all the answers, and we don't, there may have been something we missed, and if there is, put it in the comments for us, and we'll always try to take a look at it and comment and look over if we can. So we'll see you on the next one.